I'm calling it confident naivety. Now, you might say that's just dumb luck or just blind stupid or something like that. But we were confident in what we were doing, but naive enough not to overthink it. So what we've done on this one, I said it in the rehearsal room, you can't fake confident naivety. You either are or you know what you're doing.
This is Tom from Ghost Cult Magazine, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Craighan, guitarist and founding member of English doom metal icons, I think we can say, My Dying Bride, who, as we do this interview, are just about to release their 15th album, Immortal Binding, your second full-length album on Nuclear Blast Records, I believe. And it's bleak, it's icy, it's grand, it's powerful, and I like it a lot. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. So I read from the press release that, and I mean, it's kind of like an obvious thing at this point, talking to any band about what happened in the past few years. We all had that black void of COVID that hit. But I understand that had some impacts on the way that you went about making the latest record. So could you tell me a bit about how COVID sort of changed how you worked and how you made the record?
Well, initially, I think I probably speak for almost everybody, the lockdowns were disastrous for a creative, or from a creative point of view. And we did nothing. We really struggled, I have to admit, with the whole thing. So it didn't help us as a band, as a creative outfit or anything like that. There was no rehearsals, there was no home writing, there was a void, if you will, of hope and sort of an element of, are we ever really getting back out of this? We seem to have voted for tyranny. We don't really, common sense seems to have left the building. It affected us, and it affected some of us more than others as well. So it took some time for the band almost to creep back out from under its rock that it had been placed into. And the first thing we did do was a couple of shows in England, which were probably more useful from a therapy point of view than they were from actual gigs. But we found them, or I certainly found them, to be lifeless, well attended. Well, both of these gigs were well attended, but there was something wrong with people, and we hadn't really learned to let us air down, metaphorically and physically, I suppose. And it was very strange. There was a strange vibe to the pair of them, but at least we were back out, in that kind. And then, so when I started to write again, or gather my thoughts, if you will, and I had lots of ideas pre-COVID. Then we started to build on these, thinking, oh, okay, we've got another album we can start contemplating more than working on. When it was obvious that we were really beginning to get back to normal, if you will, if you want to call this version of normal. I wouldn't call what we're going through now normal, but you appreciate we won't go into the politics and all that kind of stuff. But so we got back to a semblance of normality, which we're now in. We found ourselves sort of rejuvenated, but also this can be taken away from us again, and they're already threatening that. So we better make the most of this, because we were under the impression that they've not finished. Won't go into the conspiracy theory aspect of it, but there's plenty of them. So once we got back to rehearsal and we were really in the rehearsal room going for it, we found ourselves almost like, let's just go back to basics. Let's just be a rock band, or if you want to call it rock band, or a heavy metal band. We won't do any strange instrumentations. We won't bring any guest vocalists in or any guest cellists in this time, even though on Ghost of Orion, Lindy Faye Heller and Joe Quayle on cello were phenomenal and really enhanced the record. And I think they did, actually. They played in ways that we couldn't have expected. But we just thought, we'll go back and we just enjoyed the rehearsals. And we stacked our speakers up and we blasted our heads off to these new, what we decided would be brasher, bolder, bigger riffs. And we just tried to sort of simplify it and try to enjoy it as well at the same time, because suddenly we were really back at it. I won't say it was a rejuvenation, because that's too joyous a word, but there was something. It was a break back to normality that we thought we may have lost forever. And it did. The impact was very negative early on, but then turned into, we managed to turn it around, I think. And I think the album itself speaks for that now, turn it into a positive. But it was grim for a while.
And what about the way that you recorded the album? Because if I've got it right, you were doing things remotely in a way that you hadn't done before. Is that right?
Not remotely as such. How we do.
Oh, well, separately, maybe I should say.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Separately, yes. What would happen is we initially get the drums. We were very well rehearsed on this. We spent a lot of time, over probably 12, 14 months, in rehearsals, back to front to back, stripping these songs back, up and down, making sure everything kind of felt like it should be where it is. And then once we got the drums down, which is kind of the backbone of the whole thing, we did initially go in sort of bunched up, but you can't all record at the same time, but it was just good fun. But then as it moved in and moved on, we started getting sporadic, where we'd get texts almost no notice, where Mark, the producer engineer who was recording all of this, said, I've managed to get 4 hours tomorrow. Who can make it? And someone would go, I can make it tomorrow. So we'd drive across to either Manchester or Huddersfield, depending on which studio we were using, rush in, record very professionally, not rushing at that part, and then disappear. And then there might be a time where you can get both guitars in. Me and Neil would go in for a day. It might be one. It's like, who can make Thursday? And we'd go across, and because it was useful to have both guitars there, just so we could see. Well, it was just useful. And so we did do it very ad hoc, very broken up. Because I mean, in many respects, it actually helps us because we're not a full-time band. We have to work at the same time. So this, rather than booking 4 weeks off and saying, right, we need 2 weeks of you and 1 week of you, taking little bits of time here and there and recording on evenings and weekends really works. And I don't think you can tell. I mean, the recording process, once in the studio, was as professional as it could be. It was just the time wasn't block booking.
Yeah, well, that was kind of an interesting thing for me when I read that, because listening to the album, one of the things that stands out is there's lots of great, I would say, like interplay between the guitars and the drums, for example. It's like the guitars hold these slow, steady, evolving, but, sort of evolving slowly parts. And then the drums have got these really cool rolls and fills that they'll do in amongst that. So to me, I'm thinking like, oh, this sounds like, like there's a lot of interplay going on here. So yeah, it doesn't sound like you recorded the parts separately, and it makes sense that you were quite well rehearsed with these tracks. So
yeah, what you're detecting there, I think I recorded, I have video of the rehearsals. I must have 12 months at least of rehearsals, and we have 3 drummers working on this album at one point. So I've got a selection, so I can tell roughly where we are by which drummer we've got. So I would then come back and review them, and not all of them, but there would be certain sections that I'd make mental notes and parts we wanted to keep, because people can do accidental things and then forget for the next rehearsal. And believe me, with the amount of riffs we were working with, monstrous at some points, it was difficult to keep track. So I would cherry pick, if you will, and go back to Dan and say, like, this is the recording, 2 minutes 18 riff, whatever Candlemass riff we normally call them, or Slayer riff or something. They don't sound like that. So anyway, that's how we colour them. So listen to that. That's the fill. Keep that fill. Or you do a part that blah blah blah, and you've only done it on the second and the third, but you've missed the fourth repetition. That's So having someone like me who's particular like that, and then having 14 to 16 or whatever it was, 18 months of rehearsals. That you are actually detecting. We were well disciplined, and there was still some free flowing recording. There always is, but we at least managed to keep the bits that I think you've spotted now, that where the band accidentally, it's kind of like jamming, where it just flows and it's right, but sometimes you forget them. I've tried to keep on as many as humanly possible, and it comes with some of the harmonies that the violins accidentally played, and I said, well, no, you're playing on the wrong part, but it's better now.
Yeah.
So, it's not all played for and got. Some of it's just accidental, just time and time again, and just you just cherry pick. But recording it like I did like a normal recorder, and then I videoed it as well, which may see the light of day later on. I don't know if you see. But we slogged it out. We really, those rehearsals were two or three a week. It must have been 14 to 18 months or something like that.
Wow.
And some of the songs we disassembled twice, only to put them back together the same way. And you scratch your head thinking, well, we're not doing that again. That's enough now. We've tried and tried, and this is the way it works.
Yeah.
So, and I'm hoping it comes across at least that it sounds cohesive on the album.
It definitely sounds cohesive, and I think another thing that I really appreciate about the album, it's got, I'd say, a very, very coherent tone. So there's a sort of like I think I said at the very beginning, icy, because I didn't want to say cold, because it's not like it's sterile, it's not like it's lacking in emotion, but there's something icy about it, and it's kind of, there's this grandness to the music, but if this is not a contradiction in terms, kind of like understated at the same time. So it's not over the top grand. It almost feels to me like when I listen to the album, I think of like some sort of immortal being that's been around for hundreds or thousands of years and is tired. It's like it's so exhausted, but it's also powerful, and it's dragging itself along. Like I get a real sense of toil from the album.
You just described me. That was yeah. No, I actually recognize that guy. That's us. I'm not sure that certainly wasn't something that we aimed for. The imagery that you displayed there, portrayed there, is interesting, and also the icy word. But we've never heard that used before. But this is kind of the interesting part about when people listen to the record. We can't hear what they're about to hear. We can listen to the same music side by side, but we're not going to hear what you hear, and obviously your perception and the way you decipher it. So it's interesting that you've got this sort of. It's kind of like I think it's like a controlled grandeur, but it's not looking for the attention.
Yeah.
It just is. It knows, because what I'll try to take some of the credit here but not deliberately take some of the credit. I'll try to point out what we've tried to do. We've deliberately kept all the harmonies so basic that anybody with at least one finger and one string can play them. And it's quite by design. It's not an accident, because we can play more complicated if we needed to. But we didn't see the point. And then with the violin particularly, because when we record, like I keep going on about how many, over a year we've been doing these rehearsals, we would get Shaun to play the violin and the keyboards over everything, back to front, to the point where he was probably sick of hearing his own violin, like we were just as sick as hearing it as well. But then it serves two purposes, but the point being, when we come to, because the vocals have to sit in the gap, so when the vocals are on and we start to look where the violin is best, we know we've got the best part, and then we strip it all back and just cherry pick. Again, we're only using the violin where we think it's going to be effective. We're not letting you play just because you own it. It's not a gimmick. It's there for the absolute, if it can add another element of misery, I suppose, on top, that's where you come in. But if we overdo it, it loses its effect.
Yeah.
So we've been quite precise and quite, I think, disciplined, because less can be more in this type of music. And again, the balance is trying not to just play dreadfully slow songs that become dull. We've tried to avoid that with some of the more up-tempo parts. So I think the elegance within it is because we kind of know what we're doing. We're fairly well disciplined, and we know not to overthink it, if you will. I'm not claiming that we got that right. I'm suggesting that I'm hoping we got that right, and you may have detected something.
And on that point, like, from that description that I gave and the way that you were characterizing it, I was also wondering as well, do you have a sense that you've grown into your sound in a way? Because there is this aspect of weariness in this grand way. And it feels like the more life experience you have, the more you've sort of been dragged through things, the more you're in a position to really put that into the music. So do you get a sense of that?
Yes. And it's easier for me as kind of just a muse. I do write some lyrics for the band, but I don't write very many. So I tend to just stick to what I know the best. It's easy for me to translate my real world, sadnesses, and the experience of lockdowns and those kind of things, and put it into this. But if we were to write a song about the lockdowns, it'd be much, much worse than this. It'd be dire, it'd be unlistenable misery. So what we wanted to do is almost, I come up with this phrase, and I'm fairly sure it applies to us and other young bands. When we were young, and we did like As the Flower Withers and Turn Loose the Swans and those kind of things, and Angel, and we didn't have a plan. We had a rough idea what we wanted to do, but no real idea how. But we were based it. I've looked back and thought, well, I'm calling it confident naivety. Now you might say that's just dumb luck or just blind stupid or something like that. But we were confident in what we were doing, but naive enough not to overthink it. So what we've done on this one, I said it in the rehearsal room, you can't fake confident naivety. You either are or you know what you're doing. And so I've tried to rebuild, and this is where the less is more comes back, where I can write miserable riffs all day long, but no one really wants to hear really miserable riffs. So there's plenty of bands doing that. So we tried to write emotive but interesting, and I like the power. I like the big riffs, and we went back to, let's just write some basic riffs, big chunky riffs, chugging, bit of feedback. We all love that. Pinch harmonics. Wow, let's do that. We haven't done that for years. And it was like, well, we did it when we were kids and no one complained. Let's just bring it back. What's stopping us? So in many respects, the sort of going back to COVID and all the lockdowns and so on, broke some shackles, and we kind of rethought, well, what made us smile back then? Let's do some more of that. Because we need, believe it or not, making this music makes us smile. I know it doesn't sound like it, but we love it. You know what I mean? And we really enjoy doing it. And in rehearsal, if you see, if you say like The Apocalyptist, when we were writing that, I mean, if you were to take photographs of us, you wouldn't say doom metal.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who it would look like, but it wouldn't have been a doom metal band. We were over the moon at the sound of it, the massiveness and the flow of the whole, the whole sort of sections. So for us, it was a big release and a joyous, almost heavy metal celebration. And somehow we've made it sound like this.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I know what you mean. It seems like a contradiction to be smiling while making this kind of music, but I can understand it. I talk to people making extreme metal, some of the most severe sounding music, and I ask them a similar question. Where's the fun? And they're like, oh no, we're having a great time when we're doing this. It's a pleasure to do. So yeah, you can express something quite dark and painful, but you can still enjoy it for sure. And I guess it speaks to the fact that you've been doing this for so many years now. If you weren't enjoying it, then it'd be a struggle.
Yeah, well, it would. Yeah, and I actually said this recently. Sometimes it is a struggle. It's not all plain sailing. Sometimes it's very tough, and certainly going to rehearsals a couple of nights, 2 or 3 times a week after work as well, can take its toll. And I could see that, particularly with Dan on drums. If we rehearsed close to the weekend, he was withered. You could barely keep him awake because he works a strange shift as well. So he would sneak out of work while at work, drive to our rehearsal, do 4 hours with us, and then drive back to work. And I'm thinking, man, that's got to be dangerous. You're fast asleep for us. How are you driving to and from his job as well, which was like I said, this weird nighttime shift thing he had going on. So it was great fun, but it's still hard graft in places. And sometimes you think we shouldn't have come in tonight. No one's really in the mood, and it takes an hour before people really sort of get revived into it. So it's mostly great fun, but there are times where you think, man, I've had enough tonight.
That is also understandable too. Yeah. I mean, reality tends to seep into all things one way or another.
It certainly does. Yeah.
One thing I was wondering, and this sort of popped into my head a few times during listening to the album, and I'm sure as well, if I went back and listened to other My Dying Bride albums, or I think I would get a sense of this, is a folk element. To what extent would you say that English folk music is in the DNA of the band?
I think I know where that's going. I accidentally discovered that I liked the idea. Well, we liked the idea of folk tales. We were big on the sort of, I think we're all big on the occult. That's just a heavy metal thing. But we don't delve into that realm quite as obviously as some bands might. But the folk tale, well, I'll start from the folk lyrical aspect and the imagery first, because we bumped into this as a concept, let's say, during the Barguest of Whitby. It's an EP. Now, musically, it couldn't be further. It's brutal death metal. It's pretty slow, but it's death metal. And it's heavy. It's 30 minutes of some of the heaviest stuff we've ever recorded in this band, quite by design. And the idea behind it being 30 minutes long was to sort of piss Peaceful off, because we didn't want them to put on the B-side like a live track or something lame like that. We thought, fuck that. So we just wrote a 30-minute song and said, right, there you go, see you later, deal with it, which they did. But we fell in love with the idea of folk, and we never thought about this. We've been going forever, but we've never touched upon these subjects. We normally made our own myths up. So like Catherine Blake, for example, I made that. The imagery behind that is it's a kind of an incubus succubus type of thing, where a woman is being visited in her dreams to the point where suicide is preferable rather than being, which you might say, well, that's just normal in real life. Some people are like that. So, but we created this whole imagery around this particular aspect of this woman's turmoil and created our own myth. Same with the light at the end of the world. We created our own myth and magic sort of story there. But then we realized that we can delve into real folklore. That helped a little bit. But musically, I don't think we're overly folk in any traditional sense, because of the note choice that we stick to is not folk oriented. But there's one that stands out, and it's Feel the Misery, on Feel the Misery. If the main riff and the vocal line that is repeated throughout just reminded me of not necessarily an English folk song, but just an Irish folk song that you might hear like a shanty type of vibe in some pub somewhere, where a guy on acoustic guitar would be singing, the lines to Feel the Misery, and then sing the chorus, and then everybody drunk would sing the chorus as well. That wasn't the idea when we were writing the album, but it dawned on me later on. I'm thinking, it's so, and oddly enough, I'd just been to Whitby, which is nearby, and there'd been a folk festival band singing. I'm thinking, am I stealing their riffs? Have I accidentally stole some folk ideas without realizing it? I didn't, but it felt like an odd coincidence. So musically, I can see why you might think that, but I don't think the influence is enough for me to claim that yes, we have a definite link to the folk aspect.
Yeah.
But the honesty, I think maybe the honesty that you get from folk music and the sorrow in folk music. If you go to the coast and listen, because they all sing in, particularly in Whitby, there's like folk troops that just turn up in pubs and sing. They all drink by the beers and they sing, and it's phenomenal. It's something to behold. But almost all of the songs are lamentations of people lost at sea. It's heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time, which I suppose is what we're trying to do, but in our own particular way. So maybe in essence, we've got links, but I'll be honest with you, I haven't really thought that through.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if it was sort of a tone that I was picking up on. Right? I mean, and I'm no expert on English folk music either, but there was something in there that I thought like, I feel there's something about folk that I feel in here. But yeah, it was just a sort of incidental part of it.
Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, we're all of that age now, as you can tell by our folk beards. So who knows? I mean, but when we're actually writing the music, or certainly when I'm writing my parts, folk isn't part of it. It's is it heavy? Does the harmony, sort of invoke an emotion? Does the harmony get in the way of the riff? There's a sort of complicated maths going on but folk doesn't appear in the list of things that I'm gauging.
Flipping things around from the traditional to the modern, and thinking over the career of the band from the early 90s, how would you say that technology has impacted on the band over the years?
It's sped things up. It makes recording far, far simpler than it ever has been. I mean, for example, where I'm sat now, I have a computer just to the side here showing. I have some notes just in case I forget dates and places. And on that, I can record like 6 guitars, bass, and have drums on within half an hour. Now, it might be a disaster, but I can record all of that if push comes to shove. Now, so within short order, I can put together 3 or 4 riffs, half a song. I never do complete songs. I like to draw the rest of the band in for that. But I can at least get it started with almost no effort. You just sit here and it's all very easy. Pro Tools is fair. I use Pro Tools. It's fairly self-explanatory once you get your head around the basics. Whereas before, we'd have like little 4 tracks and tape, and they were a nightmare. And so you could get to rehearsal with ideas, but you had to rely on your memory a little bit more. Here, you can go with fully fledged, really quite nearly finished sections of songs. And obviously the technology, things like this, we never did interviews like this. We would type them out and post them in a fanzine. So without doubt, it's sped up, and it's made life far, far easier for planning of a band sort of rehearsal and those kind of things. And then actually recording recording the album itself. In one respect, it's made it far easier. In others, it's made it difficult. I think you've lost, when we did Turn Loose the Swans or As the Flower Withers, you can hear, if you were to play, or even maybe up to The Light at the End of the World, if you were to put a metronome on the beginning of the song and let it play and stick to it, and then you will find the song speeds up towards the end, because we never played to click, but no one noticed. We didn't know, and we were doing it. It's only years later when you listen back, you think, man, it's twice as fast at the end than it is at the front. But that just felt natural, so naturally. Yeah. Whereas now we play to brutal click tracks, it's like some sort of torture, bam, bam, and you're mercilessly on the beat. And I think somehow we've learned to play in and amongst the beat to give it an element of life, which takes some doing as well. I think it's great, actually. It's a massive, massive advantage for people like me who don't have a massive home studio. But I also think it can be a little bit soulless sometimes, because it can draw. Say if I wasn't so into playing at rehearsal, I could sit here, if push comes to shove, and write an album by myself. But I don't think that's the point of a band. I like the group aspect. I like to be in rehearsal with the other guys, and we vote my riffs. I mean, I only take my riffs to rehearsal when I'm really sure that they're going to get voted in. If I don't think they stand a chance, I don't show up with them. So, and then we vote on them. And if someone has an harmony that I don't like or do like, we vote on that. So we get this camaraderie that we're all quite literally on the same page. And I think that's important to music, because otherwise you've just got one guy saying, this is how it is, you play this, and it's kind of sterile and a little bit going back to cold potentially. Well, when they're fully involved and they've got their parts in there, I think you can tell there's something else about it. And obviously they enjoy it more too, because they've been part of the creation process.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Thinking about that unified band and being all together, what are the plans once the album comes out in terms of touring? Touring,
we've got some live problems at the moment that you may have seen on the internet. We need to tidy up, let's say, which I can't go into detail just now, because I don't know all the answers. But we do have some shows that we will be doing, and there's some that we won't be doing. But immediately after the album, which comes out on Friday, we have an EP to finish, which we started some time ago and then got sidetracked. So I think step one is release the album, and step two is finish the EP, which is probably going to be similar but darker. This is going to be a different step, but it's not necessarily where the band's going musically. It's just that we've decided to be more horror based on this EP than we were on the album. So I'm quite looking forward to that, because we've always used EPs as kind of like an experimental mixing pot where we can potentially try things we wouldn't dare on the album, even though we're fairly daring. So album, EP, work out as life problems, which I'm sure will come good. And then we don't do Iron Maiden-esque tours anyway. We're very down to earth type of thing. So it'll just be standard gigs, festivals, as and when we can.
Well, when the time comes, I'll be very keen to catch you guys live. So I'll be watching to see when the dates are announced.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing you.
Cool. Andrew, well, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.